Everybody back? Okay, well, I'm going to introduce our wonderful Lee Lawrence, who is here to speak tonight. So, ever since his near-death experience 30 years ago, Lee has been able to perceive the stored memories of other people as physical to his perception of reality, thus earning him the description someone who, quote, reads souls. During this time, Lee has studied psychology, neuroscience, and religions to ground his expanded perception of reality in current scientific understanding of the human physical body and how it interacts with the human psyche. His studies have combined these specialized fields into one unified body of knowledge, without discounting the evidence of current research and understanding. So I personally have worked with Lee several times as also members of my family, and it has had miraculous results from that. The last time he spoke, a woman who actually had done some volunteer work for SFF came up here. He didn't know her from anybody. And she stood up here. He did a little demo. He said that your stomach issues that you've had all your life are going to be gone. And so he identified them. She did not tell him anything. And so he did his thing up here. And she called me a week later, and I thought she was going to ask me something about the organization. We had a fundraiser coming up. But anyway, she said, my stomach doesn't hurt for the first time in all my life. And it was a week ago, and it still doesn't hurt. That he fixed it, and I'm surprised she's not here tonight. But anyway, that's just for instance. He has lots of stories like that. But that's something that I personally experienced, and a friend of mine did too. So welcome, Lee. And his energy is magical to me. And thank you for helping us to ascend. Yay, Lee.
You know, it's funny, I've spoken here a few times, but one of the things that I found very odd is, I think twice in the last 5 years that I've spoken here, the only times I can remember that SFF was ever canceled, once was for an ice storm and once for a hurricane, and both of those I was scheduled to speak. Some people ask me, Lee, what do you call what you do? And I say, I don't have a name for it. Well, what do you call yourself? Are you a healer? Are you a teacher? I don't have a name for it. Why not? Because there's a tendency, if we put a label on ourselves, that we establish an identity around that, and that identity that we attach ourselves to holds us back from growing even beyond that level. So Buddhist students said to him one time, are you a master? And Buddha said, no. Are you a healer? No. Are you a teacher? No. And finally they said, what are you? And Buddha said, awake. That's what you're striving for. You're striving to be awake. So what you're going to find is that a lot of what I go over tonight is more geared towards helping you to understand your own journey and why you're here. Topic: we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. You've all heard that, but what does that really mean? It's a true statement. You are not these physical bodies. You are your soul or consciousness, which is occupying these physical bodies, but that's only a small part of you. So just as when you were in your mother's womb, that created a vessel for your physical and your soul to develop in a safety confined area of your mother's womb. where you were limited to your mother's sensory perceptions and you perceived your mother's experiences as your experiences. And then you were born, and all of a sudden, you started perceiving from your five senses, and you started developing your own physical body. That physical body is also just a vessel for your consciousness or your soul to grow. No matter what religion you look at, what they're doing is they're teaching you the stages in soul growth. So in Christianity, when they talk about dying daily, they're just talking about letting go of the old you. Or in Buddhism, approaching no self, which is kind of hard to do. That's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. But no self is where you've let go of everything. Because again, in Buddhism, the phrase, all suffering is caused by attachment, is a very true statement. So that what happens is you're in this physical body, and there's two ways for people to die. I do a fair amount of hospice work and helping people to die. And the reason I do this is because the last hours before they die are so valuable to help them. There was one person that many of you know that died in 2016, and she had no family, so I opened my door and she stayed at my house the last month while she was dying of cancer. And she would not mind me sharing this because we talked about it, and I've shared it before. But as I was walking into the room, now I had known that she had a brother that she hadn't talked to and was angry at and didn't get along with. And I didn't know that she had been married, I think, 4 times, but no children. And we took her in to help her because she was a wonderful, beautiful person. And as I'm walking into her room, all of a sudden I'm walking through a memory, and I stopped. I said, how old were you when your brother was born? She said, 14 months. I said, no wonder you hate your brother. Stop and think about this once. You're getting all of your mother's love and affection, feeding you, holding you, burping you, caring for you, and all of a sudden, you're out, new child is in. And what that does is it causes the older child to resent the younger child, and it also causes them to not trust love. In men who cheat in their relationships, I have found this over and over and over again. Because what happens is when a child goes through the terrible twos, that's where they create separation and they push the parent away. The terrible twos. It's where I am somebody now and I have my own will, separate from yours. At that point in time, now, extended families decrease the effect of this, especially if there's grandparents and more people and older siblings to care for them. But what happens is when that shift takes place, she hated her brother who took her mother's love away. And she said, oh, it was worse than that. My mother couldn't care for both of us, so she sent me away where I lived with my grandmother for my preschool years. Now, I realized that because I just walked into her soul, and there was the memory stored there in her soul. But here's what was important. 12 hours before she died, I said, you realize it wasn't your brother's choice to take your mother's love and affection away. It just happened. Would you like to forgive him for being angry at him? And she forgave him right on the spot, and she cried, and that heavy weight that she had been carrying in her soul for the 68 and a half years since her brother was born, that she hated him her entire life, was all of a sudden gone. So what happens is, it goes back to the parable in the Bible of the vineyard workers. It doesn't matter if you started in the beginning of the day, the middle of the day, or even came in at the last hour, the reward at the end of the day is the same. No one here is too old to do their spiritual work.